This morning, like some other mornings, I was privileged to be able to contribute a video devotional to a devotional page here on Facebook. I thought it went well until the comments started rolling in. There were some folks who disagreed, and that's understandable. We're not all going to agree on everything. However, the comments quickly turned carnal. The moderator wisely removed this video from the thread. We don't want there to be any reason to have division or strife, especially when it could be seen by young believers or unbelievers. The content of this video? Well, that's where it gets a little ironic. Peacemaking. So, if you bear with me for just a few minutes, I'd like to share with you what the Bible has to say about peacemaking. Not Michael Britt's opinion, not my own subjective teaching, but what Jesus said about peacemaking in the Gospel according to Matthew. Before entering into any discussion, especially discussions that can cause dissension or dispute, it's imperative that we define our terms. The term we're going to define right now, peacemaking. If you look it up in any concordance, you'll find that the word peacemaking comes from poios. It's a compound Greek word that's translated as one word, peacemaker, in the English Bible. Many English translations translate this peacemaker. It's the right word to choose. This word peacemaker carries with it an understanding, in English and in Greek, of someone who, at all costs, pursues peace with his neighbor. Pretty simple so far. Where it gets complicated, when we introduce another word, pacifist or pacifism. Today, in the 21st century Western world, when we think of a word like pacifism, we're thinking about it with all the baggage that comes with it. We tend to be inundated with mental images of hippies or Jane Fonda or Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, people who just say peace, man, and don't do anything to defend their families or themselves. I get it. But is that really what the word pacifist or pacifism means at its core? It's not. Think about it. The root of this word pacifism or pacifist already has a place in our English language today. We use it all the time. Ever heard of a pacifier? Sure. A pacifier is something that you place in a baby's mouth while it's crying or perhaps teething to give that baby some peace and also to give mom and dad some peace. A pacifier. It's an object that creates peace. Another fun way to illustrate this, if you think about the oceans, you have the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, then you have the Pacific Ocean. Not Pacific Ocean, Pacific Ocean. And it has to do with being a pacified ocean. Sure, it was named after an idea of tranquility and peace. So pacifist and pacifism are not bad words. Though today, I understand why they might have a negative connotation in the minds of some, especially those who fought for our country to secure our freedoms and liberties. But pacifism, in and of itself, is not a bad word. It just means someone who strives for and or creates peace. It is in this sense that Jesus calls us to be pacifist. That is, a peacemaker. In fact, if you look up that fun Greek word, poios, in the Strong's Concordance, the first word you'll find, pacificatory. Someone who acts like a pacifier. So what did Jesus mean when he said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God"? Well, here's the Campbell Soup version. All throughout Matthew chapter 5, you'll find Jesus teaching his new followers principles that at first seemed like they ran completely contrary to the Torah laws. That's why he clarified and said, "Don't think that I've come to abolish the Torah laws, I've come to fulfill them. Rather, I've come to expose the heart behind these Torah laws so that you can know the heart of God, not just follow his commandments by way of some non-relational restraint." Jesus came to teach us the new kingdom ethics that is to be transformed into the image of Jesus Christ. One of these ways, being a peacemaker. To Jesus, being a peacemaker meant that we don't resist evil when it happens to us. We don't pick up our pitchforks and torches and go storm the house of whatever governor did this to us, or whatever president did that to us, or whatever local leader did this to us. No, it actually means quite the opposite. Jesus takes the opportunity to clarify. As we continue to listen to Jesus teach in Matthew chapter 5, he tackles this issue of peacemaking very clearly. There should be no confusion what Jesus meant. Listen, he said, "You've heard that it was said in the past, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you," in other words, just with Jesus authoritatively fulfilling these laws. The lex talionis, or principle of retaliation, the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth law, was established in the Torah as a way of limiting retaliation to the appropriate grievance. In other words, if somebody dropped a rock on your foot, you couldn't go murder their whole family, right? There would be an appropriate response. It was actually set in place because of the hardness of men's hearts to restrain their actions so that they wouldn't fall into complete chaos. So when Jesus came, he didn't contradict the lex talionis, he fulfilled it. He said, guys, this law was in place because of the hardness of your heart, just like divorce, just like a number of other things. He said, but now I want to show you a new ethic of living. Instead of just restraining your behavior as a covenant people, I want to put my law in your heart. He wanted to introduce us to becoming like Jesus. And in so doing, he said, if somebody slaps you across the face, don't hit back. In fact, turn the other cheek. If somebody takes one of your articles of clothing, don't grab it back. In fact, give him the other one. If some Roman soldier grabs you and makes you carry his gear all the way down the road for a whole mile, don't talk back, don't refuse, don't resist the evil, he says. In fact, go with him 2 miles. Wow, that was revolutionary. But Jesus would never ask us to do something that he wouldn't do himself. So do we ever find Jesus being this kind of peacemaker? Sure we do. In the crucifixion week, when he was beat, he was slapped and punched and bruised. Did he ever hit back? No. In fact, he turned the other cheek. He was like a lamb led to the slaughter. He didn't even open his mouth. When they took his garments, did he fight back? No. He let them take all of them. And when they loaded the Roman soldiers' responsibility onto Jesus' shoulders, unjustly. The whole thing was a farce. Did he fight back? No. Did he disagree? No. Did he say, well, I really shouldn't be doing this, but I guess I will because, I love people. No, he just did it. He didn't resist the evil. Why? Because of love. Because of love. Jesus Christ said, I've got a greater mission in mind than standing up for my own rights. To Jesus, it was worth being a peacemaker. Nowhere is this pictured better than Jesus' own death and resurrection. For the new covenant to come alive, Jesus Christ had to die and then rise again. He said it himself. The mustard tree doesn't grow unless if the seed first dies. Come on, saints. If the first Christians had fought back against Nero and said, I know my rights, I live here, do you think the gospel would have spread? Come on, saints, come on. You know better than this. If Peter had been encouraged to cut off Malchus's ear and Jesus said, good job, Peter, nice cut. No, the gospel wouldn't have spread. The Roman soldiers would have said, these guys are rebels just like any of them. Let's take them all down. But the followers of Jesus showed that they were different because Jesus said, hey, we're not going to kill people. That's not how we roll. We're not going to be angry, divisive dissenters. We're going to be makers and keepers of peace. Have you noticed, as Jesus talks about being a disciple, being a follower of Jesus, one of his, he talks about bearing your cross. He talks about being willing to go down to the grave with him. That's what baptism represents. Baptism represents a death to self and a new life in Jesus. How can we share in this new life of Jesus if we don't look like him? Christianity is not real Christianity if we're not constantly being transformed to resemble our Savior, Jesus Christ. So there might be some objection to being a peacemaker. There might be some objection to the idea of being dead to rights so that the gospel kingdom can flourish. Well, I'll address a few. One reason why someone might not want to be like Jesus in being a peacemaker would be because of a loss of control. You see, when we surrender the idea of vengeance and revenge and retaliation to a sovereign God, we don't have control of the situation anymore. We don't like that. We want to be able to make sure that that person gets their just due. Well, you don't always have control of that situation. And if we learn anything from current events especially, that the minute we try to take justice into our own hands, we don't do as good of a job with it as we'd like to think. We're humans, and humans make mistakes even in the most noble of endeavors. The second reason why someone might choose to not be like Jesus and being a peacemaker would be because of a lust for blood. I have seen so many clips and videos of people with their big guns and they say, boy, if they make me wear a mask, I'm going to put one right between their eyes. I want to promise you something, that attitude is not part of the kingdom of heaven. That attitude is rebellious. It is sick. It is carnal. As Christians, we of all people should be treasurers of life. And because someone disagrees with us, their life is less valuable? Because someone violates our rights, they don't deserve our love? Wicked. And the last reason why someone might not want to follow Jesus and be like Jesus in the way of being a peacemaker would be because of a lack of trust. We kind of touched on this one in point number 1, but a lack of trust in Jesus. You say, man, I don't have control over the situation. That's right. You've got to give it to God. Do you really believe that God is sovereign and in control? If we did, we'd trust him with more of this sort of retribution stuff. Things have been done wrong to me and even this church. And instead of saying, I'm going to sue them or I'm going to hound them and make them do the right thing, I just say, you know what? God's got this. There's not enough time on my plate to chase everybody down who's done something wrong to me. There's not enough energy in my body to fight over every single right that's been violated. Come on, saints. That's not our calling. Our calling is to show people the love and peace of Jesus Christ. We sing about the wonderful grace of Jesus, but we often don't show it when there's an opportunity to make or keep peace. So where does that leave us? That leaves us in a place where we've got a choice to make. When bad things happen to us, do we say, I can't believe this is happening to me and I'm going to fight back no matter what? Or do we say, there may be something bigger happening here? It's been said that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. What would it be like if there were no martyrs? What would it be like if Nate Saint, Roger Udarian, and Jim Elliott went to the Auca Indians, they found themselves ambushed, and they grabbed that gun that they had in the airplane, because they had one, and just mowed them all down? Would we see the kingdom extending to the Auca Indians? Come on, saints. What if Jesus had not been a peacemaker? What if he'd said, I know my rights? Well, he surrendered his rights. He took upon himself the form of a servant. And to be honest with you, saints, I think that's really the big obstacle to being a peacemaker. Someone who says, I'm going to make sure that my agenda gets fulfilled. Well, maybe we don't know best. I know it's tough to apply this to a lot of scenarios in our lives. I mean, America was born because of a revolution. I don't know how to spell a perfectly formulated statement about that. But I do know that in our individual lives, we're supposed to be peacemakers, pacificatory people, pacifiers, pacifists, if you will. People who others can come to knowing that violence and bloodlust is not here. Now, one objection I heard was, well, when Jesus comes back riding on a white horse, he's not a pacifist. I agree. That's going to be a time when the fullness of God's long-suffering has come to an end. And God will purge this world of sin. And unfortunately, those who bear this sin will be purged with it. We understand this. Is that your job? Are you going to do that? Well, I'm riding back with him on. I understand that. But who has the sword? Jesus. Yes. Who are we, his servants? What did Jesus tell us to do? Swing the sword? Literally the opposite. Not swing the sword when we're persecuted, but to establish a kingdom that is spread only through self-sacrifice, self-denial, and sometimes death. Jesus is calling all of us to follow in his footsteps. When we're slapped, do we say, I know my rights, and hit back? Or do we allow them the other cheek, knowing that something greater could be accomplished? When someone takes a possession and sues you wrongly, do we say, I'm going to countersue? Or do we say, you know what, you can have even more? When someone rips you off and leaves you hanging, do you pursue them to the full extent of the law? Paul said, Christians shouldn't be doing that to each other for sure. Don't you know we're going to judge angels? If you can't even judge amongst yourselves, yikes. How about when somebody forces you to walk a mile and is completely against everything you want to do? Go twice. Not all of us are clearly, from what I learned this morning, prepared to hear and receive something like this. But ladies and gentlemen, this is not Michael Britt's words. This is the words of Jesus Christ, calling us to live lives of peace and pacification. Let's do that. The gospel might just grow when we're willing to deny ourselves. Hope this clears things up a little bit. Love you.